Have you ever heard of the Shibuya crossing in Tokyo? A sea of lights, a chaos of people, a place where the world seems to never stop. Thousands cross its streets every minute, their footsteps echoing like a heartbeat that never slows. But there's something they don't tell you about Shibuya. Something that only comes alive when the clock strikes midnight, when the neon lights dim and the crowds vanish into the night. A train that shouldn't exist. A train that takes the lost to a destination they'll never return from. Welcome to Echoes of the Shadows, where the shadows whisper truths no one dares to hear. I am your guide through the darkness, a voice from the void, here to tell you a story that will crawl under your skin and linger long after the lights go out. Today, I'll tell you the story of Kaito and the last train to Shibuya. Brace yourselves, because this journey has no return. Kaito was a 22-year-old young man, a restless soul with a camera in hand and a hunger for the unknown. He called himself an urban explorer, someone who sought the secrets hidden in the forgotten corners of cities. Abandoned factories, crumbling tunnels, places where time had stopped but the echoes of the past still lingered. He had a following online, a small group of fans who watched his videos of explorations in Tokyo's underbelly. But Shibuya was his greatest challenge yet. The train station, with its platforms numbered from 1 to 12, was a labyrinth of steel and glass, a hub of life during the day. But at night, the rumors came alive. They spoke of a platform 13, a place that didn't exist on any map, a place that only appeared to those who carried an emptiness in their hearts, a void so deep it called to the shadows. Kaito had heard the story since he was a child, whispers of a train that appeared at midnight, a train that carried no passengers, or so they thought. He never believed in it, dismissing it as a ghost story meant to scare kids, until his best friend Haruto vanished. Haruto was like a brother to Kaito, the two of them inseparable since middle school, always exploring together, always chasing the next thrill. But one night, Haruto went to Shibuya Station alone, chasing a lead about Platform 13. At 11:58 p.m., he sent Kaito a message. He claimed to have seen the train, its lights glowing in the dark, its whistle cutting through the silence. That was the last Kaito heard from him. Haruto disappeared as if he had never existed, leaving behind only that haunting message and a void in Kaito's life that he couldn't fill. Determined to find his friend, Kaito went to Shibuya Station that night, his camera strapped to his chest, his heart racing with a mix of curiosity and dread. He navigated the station's corridors, passing by the last stragglers of the night, tired workers, drunken salarymen, a lone janitor sweeping the floor. He found a staircase in a dimly lit corner, one that most people would overlook, with a rusted sign that read, "Closed for maintenance." The air grew colder as he descended, the silence pressing against his ears like a physical weight. At the bottom of the stairs, he found it. A forgotten platform, covered in dust and cobwebs, the tiles cracked and faded, the air thick with the scent of decay. On the wall, almost erased by time, was a number painted in peeling red. 13. Kaito's breath caught in his throat as he checked the time. 11:59. The lights above him flickered, then went out completely, plunging the platform into darkness. A sound echoed in the void, faint at first, then growing louder. The whistle of a train approaching, coming from nowhere, as if the tracks had materialized out of the shadows. When the darkness lifted, Kaito was no longer on the platform. He found himself inside an old train car, a relic that seemed to have been pulled from another era, its walls lined with faded posters in Japanese, its seats torn and stained, the air heavy with the stench of mold and hands something else, something metallic like dried blood. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting long shadows that danced across the floor, and the windows showed only a black void, as if the train were crossing an abyss where light couldn't reach. Kaito's hands trembled as he held the camera, capturing every detail. Deep scratches on the walls, as if someone had clawed at them in desperation. Dark stains on the floor that looked too much like blood to be anything else. And a torn ticket that seemed to have been left there for him, its edges yellowed with age. On it, a single handwritten phrase in shaky letters. "Don't look at him." Kaito's heart pounded as he turned the camera, searching for any sign of life, any clue about where he was. In the corner of the car, a figure sat, facing away, motionless, her long black hair spilling over her shoulders like a curtain. She wore a tattered dress, the kind you'd see in old photographs from the 1950s, and her presence sent a chill down Kaito's spine. He took a step closer, his breath fogging in the cold air, and as he did, the figure turned slowly. There was no face, just a smooth, featureless surface, as if someone had erased her identity, leaving behind a void where her eyes and mouth should have been. Kaito stumbled back, his heart racing, nearly dropping the camera as a wave of terror washed over him. He didn't know what to do, but the woman raised a trembling hand and pointed to a door at the end of the car, as if inviting him to follow, as if she knew something he didn't. With his body shaking, he approached the door, the rusted handle cold against his skin, and pushed it open, stepping into another car where the horror deepened. This car was different. There were people here, seated in rows, but they weren't alive. Not truly. Their eyes were wide open, fixed on something invisible, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. Some had tears streaming down their cheeks, others had their mouths open in silent screams, and their lips moved, murmuring disjointed words that formed a chorus of despair, a sound that seemed to echo inside Kaito's mind, clawing at his sanity. An old man in a tattered suit clutched a briefcase, his fingers white from the grip. A young woman in a school uniform stared at the ceiling, her hands clawing at her own throat. A child, no older than 6, held a broken doll, her small body trembling as if she could feel something Kaito couldn't see. At the far end of the car, a tall, thin figure appeared, dressed in an old conductor's uniform, the fabric faded and stained with something dark. There was no face, just a shadow where features should have been, a void that seemed to swallow the light around it. He approached slowly, his steps deliberate, and Kaito felt the air grow colder, heavier, as if the train itself were holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to happen. The train wasn't just a ghost, it was a prison, a relic of a tragedy that Tokyo had buried long ago. In 1953, during the post-war years, Shibuya Station was a hub for those trying to rebuild their lives, a place of hope amidst the scars of war. But on a cold December night, a train on the Yamanote line derailed just outside the station, near what would later become Platform 13. The official reports called it an accident. Faulty brakes, icy tracks, a tragic mistake. But the truth was darker. The train was carrying passengers who had been marked as undesirables by a shadowy group within the government, people who had spoken out against the regime, people who knew too much. They were being transported to a secret facility, but the train never made it. It derailed, and a fire broke out, consuming the cars in minutes. The screams of the passengers echoed through the night, but no one came to help. The government covered it up, sealing off the platform, erasing it from the maps, and burying the truth in a web of lies. But the train never left. It became something else, a vessel for the pain and fear of those who died, a predator that hunted the broken, the guilty, the lost. It appeared at midnight, always at platform 13, seeking new passengers to feed its endless hunger. Kaito didn't know this history, but he could feel it, the weight of the train's past pressing down on him, the air thick with the echoes of those who had suffered. The conductor, that faceless shadow, was no longer human. He was the train's will made manifest, a guardian of its eternal loop, a collector of souls. And Kaito was his newest prey. The train stopped abruptly, and Kaito found himself in an empty car, the lights flickering faster, the sound of the train speeding up like a panicked heartbeat that reverberated through the walls. He knew something was wrong. The train felt alive, as if it knew who he was, as if it knew the weight he carried in his chest, the secret he had buried deep inside. Kaito wasn't just an explorer. He was a young man haunted by a guilt that gnawed at his soul. Years ago, on a hot summer day, he took his younger brother Ren to play at a lake on the outskirts of Tokyo. The water was calm, the sun high in the sky, and the two boys laughed as they splashed each other, their voices echoing across the shore. But Kaito, distracted by his phone, didn't notice when Ren ventured too far, when the current pulled him under. Ren's cries for help were drowned out by the sound of notifications, and by the time Kaito looked up, it was too late. He ran into the water, screaming Ren's name, but the current was too strong, and Ren's small body disappeared beneath the surface, leaving Kaito with nothing but the memory of his brother's terrified eyes. He never told anyone the truth, not his parents, not Haruto, not even himself. The guilt followed him like a shadow, a constant reminder of his failure, a wound that never healed. And now the train seemed to know it, seemed to see right through him. The car doors opened with a groan, but there was no platform on. The other side, it was the lake, recreated inside the train, with dark water reflecting the faint, flickering light of the bulbs. The air grew humid, the smell of algae and decay filling the car, and a child's voice echoed through the space, calling Kaito's name, begging for help in a tone that was both familiar and wrong. He stepped back, his shoes slipping on the wet floor, but the water began to leak into the car, rising quickly, lapping at his ankles, then his knees. In the reflection on the surface, he saw Ren, or what was left of him. His brother's face was distorted, his eyes black as the void, his skin pale and bloated, as if he had spent years underwater, his small hands reaching out from the depths. Ren emerged from the water, his movements jerky and unnatural, and grabbed Kaito's leg with a grip like ice, pulling him into the liquid darkness. Kaito struggled, his hands clawing at the air, his lungs burning as the water closed over his head, dragging him into an abyss where the sound of his own screams was swallowed by the silence of the deep. When the darkness cleared, Kaito was back in the original car, drenched from head to toe, his body trembling with cold and fear, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The faceless conductor stood before him, holding the camera Kaito had dropped, pointing it at the young man as if he wanted the world to see his despair, to witness his unraveling. The train began to move again, the wheels screeching against the tracks, and Kaito looked out the window, hoping to see the familiar lights of Shibuya. But the crossing was empty, not a single soul in sight, the neon signs dark, the streets abandoned, as if the entire city had vanished into the night. The conductor handed Kaito a ticket, identical to the one he had found earlier, but now with a single word written on it in red ink: forever. The lights in the car went out one by one, plunging the space into darkness, and the train sped up, plunging into an eternal loop, a cycle Kaito would never escape. He pounded on the doors, his fists leaving bloody marks on the glass, his voice hoarse from screaming, his pleas swallowed by the train's relentless rhythm. He was trapped, doomed to relive his greatest fear forever, to face Ren's accusing eyes over and over, while the train's whistle echoed through the void, a cruel laugh that mocked his suffering. The last train to Shibuya isn't just a legend. It's a trap, a predator that hunts in the shadows of Tokyo's busiest station. Kaito thought he could find his friend, thought he could outrun the past, but he found something far worse, a fate that doesn't forgive, a train that feeds on fear, a prison that never releases its passengers. If you're ever in Shibuya at midnight, don't look for Platform 13. Don't let curiosity lead you down that forbidden staircase. And if you hear the whistle of a train that shouldn't be there, run. Run as fast as you can, and don't look back. Here at Echoes of the Shadows, we bring new tales of terror every week, straight from the shadows to haunt your nights, to remind you that the darkness is always watching. What's your greatest fear? Would you have the courage to face it to escape? Or would you stay trapped forever like Kaito, lost in an eternal loop of your own making? Leave your comments below. I want to know what you would do, what haunts you in the quiet of the night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up at night, that will make you question the shadows in the corner of your room, subscribe to Echoes of the Shadows and hit the bell. The shadows are waiting, and they know your name.